Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host Greg Tompsett along with my partners in crime, Anthony Prohaska and Aaron Quinn. Gentlemen, I don't think I need to ask, but how are you doing?
I'll let you take this one, Anthony.
I want to go to bed. I just want to forget that the world exists. Thank you, Aaron, for passing it to me there. So you're so very gracious. Not great. Unfortunate loss. Aaron mentioned it when we came in here and was talking offline. I think what makes it even worse is you got to sit with that for like 2 weeks as the bye week comes up. But, it's unfortunate and nothing to do but talk about it for the next 45 minutes and feel worse about it.
No, it's go ahead, Aaron. It's a lot to deal with now when the expectations were so high.
Yeah, I think expectations got totally out of control for me here this week. I felt super confident going into this game. And actually, I think when we watch it back, I'm going to feel even more frustrated because I think that confidence wasn't unfounded and it showed itself in the first half of this game. And that's what makes this so much more frustrating is I think the Bills were mostly, for the most part of this game, the better team outside of maybe 4 to 6 plays in this game. And that's what is really going to linger with me. I don't let losses get to me all that much, and I can come on this show and smile and do the show with you guys and be over it. I think this one's going to linger here for me for a little while. And I'm really mad at myself. Last show I was on here, I ran out of Uncle Jumbo's and I told him I was going to go get some more. I didn't get some, and I could use an Uncle Jumbo's.
You did it, so it's your fault.
It's my fault.
Well, I feel better now, knowing where to place blame.
Yeah, we're going to go through a lot of details tonight, but it shows you that, even if you are a very good team, and the Buffalo Bills are a very good team. Thank you, Padden. You're right. The Dolphins
and he's true. Yeah, that's right.
They're, off to an embarrassing start. But it shows you that even if you genuinely are the better team, and I think pretty much every metric showed the Bills are better than Tennessee, but you have a couple of fluky plays go against you. You have a couple of poor decisions go against you, and you give them opportunities. You're conservative in different areas. Then you make some mistakes. We saw several poor execution, issues that'll come up during the breakdown here, and you let a team hang around and get some momentum going. They're talented. The players that were hurting us tonight, Derrick Henry, AJ Brown, like those are really talented players. Jeffrey Simmons, those are very talented. Kevin Byard, they're very talented players. That's exactly what happens if you let a team that isn't on par with your depth, with your overall talent, hang around. Well, then their high-level talented players can make plays when it matters, and we saw that, and we saw that tonight. So we'll go through our normal breakdown here, but obviously plenty of frustration, plenty of blame to go around for a loss. But you're right, Aaron. I think that when we rewatch this, there's going to be a healthy mix of relief in seeing that, man, we are really good. We had lots of opportunities here, and then even more frustration because, man, we're really good. How did we let them win this game? Look at this, look at that, look at that. So let's dive right in probably one of the biggest answers to both of those things, and that's Josh Allen. In that you see all the ends of the spectrum. He was, untouchable in stretches of the game, but also some frustrating decision-making lapses that he can't have in those critical moments.
Yeah, he comes out of the game with going 35 of 47, which is a 74.4 completion percentage, 353 yards, 3 touchdowns, the 1 interception that wasn't really
on a tip ball. It wasn't a bad pass by him.
Yeah, Spencer Brown gets beat. Knox doesn't really do anything to Danico Autry. Ball goes up in the air. Zach Moss also horribly mistimes the jump, which is an unlucky break. But you're right, Greg. Allen had some moments that blew up Twitter from all the different accounts of, people who cover football and sites that cover football. The rollout throw to Cole Beasley, just people lauding that throw. And he had a lot of strong plays. He had a lot of strong moments. And I think that'll probably get lost in this a little bit, that he had another strong game. The type of game that we've been accustomed to seeing from him. He looked sharp. He was spreading the ball around a lot, making secondary reads, finding guys in open windows. And then, was getting pressured a little bit. I don't think he navigated the pocket as well as he had in previous games to bail out the offensive line a little bit. He was sacked 3 times in this game. Not a crazy, amount, but he could have navigated the pocket a little better, but that's not necessarily on him. But a good game throwing the ball, kept us in it, has an unfortunate fourth down, gaff, if you want to say it, at the end, whether it was his slip or Simmons's play that caused the slip. But really quality game from Josh, and he did nothing in this game to dissuade us from our current confidence in him as one of the best quarterbacks in this league and one of the MVP candidates for the season.
Yeah, I've actually not a lot of bones to pick with Josh Allen about this game. I think you can nitpick some of the decision making, and there was moments in this game where he was trying to push for that big play and find it downfield. And we've seen this happen now, though, to a number of these young, explosive quarterbacks where teams are playing this cover 2 shell, taking away those D plays, and it tricks what their mind wants to do on a lot of these plays, which is get the big explosive plays. Josh still rattled off 5 explosive passing plays if you include the Stephon Diggs DPI, the 39-yard DPI. So they still had explosive passing plays. So it's not total fault that he was going for some of that stuff. They were there for him. But yeah, he needs to take profit more often. But I thought Josh is what kept them in this game. When you score that many points and your defense gets 1 turnover and then allows the Titans to continue to score, Josh Allen really kept the Bills in this game. The run game was fine, but Josh Allen is what single-handedly kept them in this game. We'll talk about offensive line in a second. They didn't do him a ton of favors in keeping him in the game, I didn't think, throughout the day. And then he showed that full heart on display, and that's something that none of these sites that we go to are going to quantify it. He didn't pick up the first down on that play, but for him to just jump with his full body towards that first down marker to try to make that play, I didn't even think he'd get close when he crossed the line of scrimmage. I was like, he's going to end up like 3 yards short. And for him to put it all out there, and obviously the results don't go the way we want, but that play stands out to me as, they talk about the heart that this kid has, but it's plays like that just really exemplify it. So I thought Josh did everything he could to will this team to victory, and just too much around him didn't go right tonight.
No, it's spot on. He was unstoppable for several drives for a large stretch of the game, that he was finding anything that was there. And to his credit, it was anytime he had protection, anytime he had any time, he was finding guys wide open downfield. The 2 issues that were a challenge that end up in a game that is a 1-score game, a field goal game, are easy to nitpick because any one of them kind of flip things around. They showed it early on. The guys pretty wide open in the end zone that were there, that if he sees them, if he's in a position where you can't expect every single big play from him every single time, but we've now raised the bar of our expectations for him. We've talked about him as the leading MVP candidate. We've talked about him as the best quarterback in the NFL. We've talked about him as the franchise quarterback for this team going forward for the next, decade plus. Then I expect you to find some of those. So some of those early field goals were on him, in my opinion, in some plays where there were plays to be made that weren't, that overall get lost in a game like this where we normally win and pull away. And it's like, oh yeah, there could have been even more if we had found those early on. Then later on in the game, you have the play where, okay, we just went down, we held them for a field goal, we have a chance here to, the Bills are up. I believe at that point it's Buffalo 31, Tennessee 27. You're in a pretty good spot. We just held them. You now have a chance to be able to put this game out of reach. You have a chance to be able to put this away. And first, Josh sees some guys, but then thinks, oh, I can take the deep shot, holds it again, and then gets tripped up by Jeffrey Simmons for the sack. You see him frustrated. He slams the ball down on the ground, knowing, they show on the replay, Tommy Sweeney's wide open.
Wide open yards, in the flat to
all
the
by
right.
himself.
Easy. That was my biggest.
Then you go on the next play. He's frustrated again, tries to make up for it, and again, probably had Sanders with a decent shot to hit a deep shot, but goes for it. They show the replay again, wide open down the field, easy plays to be able to convert. You didn't have to come back and get it all at once. Those 2 things I think are legitimate frustrations for Josh, legitimate, issues to be able to be there. Good job, Sean, killing it on Underdog. We appreciate
the little things.
Hey, find the silver linings that are here. Hell, a lot of Bills players won people fantasy games tonight. There's plenty of points that went around. Everything that went along with that, you still had a chance to win the game, and you still had a chance to come down. And Josh Allen, just like you said, Aaron, put his body on the line, threw his body over 3 Tennessee defenders. Sean McDermott was frustrated because they initially called it a first down and then changed it. They rightfully changed it. The replay showed he was a half yard short. That was an accurate call. And then on the final play, if you tell me that we have fourth and a yard, half a yard with Josh Allen going for his quarterback sneak, like he's gotten that so many times for the Bills. I'm we'll get into the coaching, we'll get into the decisions, but overall, we're going to step back from this. And even if there are some points to nitpick, Josh Allen's the reason they were in this game. He's the reason they were competitive, and he's the reason to have confidence in this team going forward. So he's shown the ability to learn from those moments and to be able to, improve in the future. And I'm sure we'll see that. In the running game, that there wasn't a ton to be seen from this. It was kind of weird that Devin Singletary looked kind of good on the first drive, and then didn't play a ton after that. Zach Moss looked okay. Tennessee's run defense and defensive line overall, we'll get to here when we get to the offensive line. Their defensive line looked pretty good, so I didn't have a lot in the run game. They looked okay, but they passed the ball 47 times to probably 13 or 14 called runs. So it was a normal, heavy passing tilt. Any thoughts on the run game?
I think they just kept it in there to keep them honest. There was a few nice runs. I saw obviously Singletary right to start was a tone-setting type run right on that first drive. And then we saw some nice patience from Zach Moss and picking up some nice gains. I think it was fine, the run game. I think the problem was, and again, we'll get to it here in a little bit, is the physicality that the Bills lacked on the offensive side of the ball. You saw it with the receivers a little bit, but I thought all night long, the outside of that Singletary run, which I thought was tone setting, the Bills, offensive line and running backs really didn't set a tone any further than that, and it showed up in not really being able to establish that or get anything going.
I think Chris's question here is fair. Do we think last week's big chunk plays that he had against Kansas City made him eager to be able to hit on those? This is probably in the back of his mind, but
he was hitting them too, though.
Yeah,
so
he also hit some of those tonight.
Yeah.
And any of the plays he took, like, they were fair. Like, Breon Borders made his best play of the game on the one that he went back and got his hands up for Sanders. Sanders was there for a huge gain. It just, didn't work out of that play. It was, everything's easy in hindsight of what's there.
Yeah, and he was probably thinking he was going to get that flag again on Borders on that D-ball. Like, hey, if I throw it up here, this guy's going to...
It's either a catch or a DPI.
Yeah. So... but back to the run game, nothing really other than that to highlight on. I think I'd like to have seen him in a game like this go to it a little bit more early to establish some more balance, but obviously not needed. The Bills put up a lot of points. I don't know that offense was the issue overall when we look back at this game.
Yeah, I think especially with a game script where the Titans secondary was so banged up already coming in, and then throughout the game they're down to like third and fourth and fifth string corners playing significant snaps, and with the Bills passing attack and the weapons that they have on the periphery, like, you're going to continue to attack that weakness. And Aaron, I think your point was spot on, where we just didn't have the physicality up front to match Tennessee tonight, who was super jacked up for this game. But I thought it made sense to continue to attack them through the air, run enough just to keep them honest. I will say, I do wish we ran a little more, just so I could have heard Louis Riddick stop saying Jackrabbit Jenkins so many times and past things. Like, oh my God. Like,
it was almost like team was rough tonight.
Yeah. It was like
Steve Levy mispronounced and miscalled people multiple times. Called Alan Tannehill twice.
Called him Tannehill. Yes. Riddick also had, like, on A.J. Brown's, like, third catch, he was like, that's A.J. Brown's first catch of the night. And I was like, no, it's his third. But other than that, I thought from a game plan perspective, the Titans had weakness in the secondary. Kevin Byard is fantastic, but they were weak on the outside, attack them through it. And that's unfortunately it didn't lead to a victory.
Well, let's talk about those guys on the outside, though, because I think this was a really nice night for the wide receiver room. We saw Cole Beasley get back involved in the game plan after a couple of weeks, and the rumblings on Twitter were starting to come out. Is this a personal thing? Is he in the doghouse? No, it clearly was game plan specific. They got him going a number of times tonight. Stephon Diggs, I think, did number one wide receiver type stuff all night long. Was a consistent target. And we saw what we've seen out of Emmanuel Sanders here from the start of the season, which is just becoming a more consistent, reliable target for Josh Allen here. Thought Dawson Knox had a decent game, nothing crazy, but He's got some nice moves. I'm not worried when I see the ball go his way anymore that it's going to be a drop on an easy play in the flats when he's just out there and a play is going deep. It's almost an automatic first down for him if you give him a few yards on a defender. His speed and his power and willingness to run through you is almost automatic at that range. But very happy with this unit. I'm glad that I got this unit to transition to tonight to talk about. There were some drops I think that we'll see from Sis. It looked like Beasley might have had a drop or two tonight, or he had his hands on him. I don't know if they will count as a drop.
Tough catches.
There was the third down
conversion
conversion where Josh had, and it's one
it's
he
a tough
normally
one.
comes up with, but
yeah, it's just I expect Beasley on third down to come up with some of those tight, low to the ground catches from Josh. It wasn't an errant throw by Josh by any means. I'm sure it won't count as a drop for Beasley, and then also getting Gabe Davis involved a little bit in this game. Another guy that we haven't seen much of. You saw him probably get a decent amount of snaps when the snap count comes out here this week. So good to see that whole room getting a little bit involved. I was kind of sick of the narratives and stories that were coming out about guys just getting pushed out of the offense when instead of looking at it as a week-to-week ability with the type of players you have. Anyone else on them?
Yeah, I thought the big three from a weaponry perspective from the wide receivers, so solid. Emmanuel Sanders, 5 catches, 91 yards, 8 targets. Aaron, to your point, Stephon Diggs doing wide receiver number 1 things, 9 catches on 11 targets, 89 yards in the touchy. Beasley, 7 catches, 9 targets, 88 yards, touchy. They played really well. They were consistently open. There were some interesting things I thought in the beginning of the game where the Titans brought some simulated pressures early, especially from the secondary, like the corners, especially in the nickel. And Allen and Beasley didn't seem to be on the same page early in terms of making some hot reads, but they course corrected that really easily and then took advantage of it for the entire rest of the game. Honestly, they were open to, to Greg's point a little. They were probably open for some even more bigger gains and big plays that Allen unfortunately couldn't hit them for. But I mean, a heavy majority of this game, you're putting up 31 points. Allen throws for 353. Manny, Diggs, and Bees looked, unguardable at times all night. Really strong game. I am a little worried about the Knox hand thing. He came over to the sideline right away. I watched when they took his glove off and they had multiple trainers looking at him and then they took him right to the locker room. We didn't see him again. So I'm interested to see how that trends, and good for Tommy Sweeney getting
one of the slight advantages of having the bye week. At least give him time to
for sure.
Yeah, can get healthy there. And also, again, trying to find little silver linings. Pretty baller that he wasn't able to grip the football and still was able to push it into the air to Josh Allen for that 2-pointer. Shout out to Tommy Sweeney for getting his first touchdown. And also, that was an amazing throw from Josh Allen over the linebacker right into Sweeney. Good for him making a play. So nice game from the weaponry in support of Josh. And, good performance overall, holistically, top to bottom.
Yeah, appreciate the support, Thomas. Means a lot. It's certainly... Yeah, there was honestly, not a lot of downside with the receiver. They fought through pass interference. They got open when they needed to. The receivers and the receiving core overall was a huge positive in this game. I don't know that there were any missed plays or opportunities that I placed squarely at them. There's a couple tough catches maybe they could have made, but I don't even think there were any blatant blame for them. It was one of the more sound overall.
You had the Beasley one on
groups.
third down, and then maybe the Diggs one on the goal line where Allen threw it a little bit outside and Diggs had to kind of like reach. He maybe could have caught it, but it's still not great ball placement.
Yeah, I don't know that. I'll be surprised if either of them are graded as drops.
Yeah, no.
When it finally comes out. Speaking of blame, Anthony, how do you think the offensive line did?
It's weird because I don't think they played great. I also don't think they were bad. I think this was more of the unit we saw be inconsistent in the first part of the season. I thought Spencer Brown at times tonight, if we just go individually, I thought Spencer Brown did some good things tonight. I also think he had several snaps that showed why he was kind of an unpolished rookie that maybe needed, to get some reps and experience before he was thrust into the starting lineup. I thought Darrell Williams was solid enough. I know he gave up a couple of pressures and some sacks, but several of those were on the deeper dropbacks where Josh was trying to push the ball downfield. My boy Mitch Morse, who I love, I thought he had a rough game tonight. He had several plays where he just got bum rushed and taken to the ground, especially in the first half, but he recovered a bit in the second. And then Feliciano, middling. Dawkins, middling to decent, nothing really like egregious. Again, I don't think this is a game where I come away looking at the offensive line and think, God, they were a vulnerability and we just got gouged all night. I definitely, I mentioned earlier, and just second Aaron's point, I definitely think Tennessee was more physical in the trenches from a defensive line versus offensive line standpoint. I thought they were meaner. They got lower. I thought they played with better leverage for a majority of the game, but I don't think the offensive line was a detriment. I would have liked to see them play better, but kind of a middling performance from them, which honestly I think is what we're going to see majority of the time. This isn't a great offensive line. This isn't a top 10 unit. It's also not a bottom 5, bottom 10 unit. They're in the middle of the NFL, and they're going to have some good games. They're going to have some mad games, and I think tonight was a mad game, especially towards the end when you need them to execute on a short yardage play like that, and they can't.
Yeah, I will jump in on that. I think I'm a little bit lower, I think, on this offensive line performance than you were. I agree with everything you said. I think the Titans were a more physical team. I think they were also aggressive in how they sent pressures, and I think they did that in knowing that the Bills were going to have trouble handling some of the different looks that they were getting, especially at Spencer Brown and Darrell Williams and some of the things on the offensive line. We saw Feliciano and Morse struggle to pass off different looks at times. And so I think there were some communication errors on top of the physical issues that they presented and being more physical at the line of scrimmage. I think that they're aggressive in how they were sending some of the different looks through the Bills off. And you saw free rushers coming a number of times and a guy just kind of standing there, not blocking anyone and looking around for who to block. So that's not a good sign when you're seeing that in the live. It's hard to evaluate offensive line. We talk about this in post game all the time. It's really hard. But when you see free rushers, and after a while, you saw Allen start to get a little hesitant, a little jittery in the pocket at times there going into the third quarter. He started to seem a little bit more jittery. He did hold the ball, it felt like, for quite a while, which put some pressure on the offensive line. So it wasn't all bad. He had pockets and times, like Greg had mentioned, he was looking for that long play, which ended up leading to a couple sacks. So it's not all bad on the offensive line. I don't even think most of the plays that were sacks were terrible offensive line plays, but he did get a number of pressures. They really didn't get much established on the run game. And when it comes down, we'll talk about the coaching decision to go for it, but going for the sneak on a game like that, where I didn't think the offensive line really set any type of physical presence throughout that game, I think that was the wrong call, because the offensive line was getting beat at the point of attack all night in the trenches. And I don't know that when the game's on the line, you put it on them to finally go out and win a match. And so I'm down on the offensive line, because I think you've got a bunch of guys on this line that act like they're the tough guys on this team, but that they don't go out and set the tone in the trenches. I'm a big believer, especially when it comes to playoffs. I think you can get by with this offensive line against the Dolphins, probably against some of these teams that we're going to come up here in this next run. But during the playoffs, you've got to win in the trenches. And those guys that act like they're tough guys have to actually be tough guys against the Ravens, against the Titans, and teams like this that will punch you back in the mouth. So right now I'm pretty frustrated with this offensive line group. One of you guys are gonna have to talk me out of it.
I'm not going to.
Yeah, I'm not going to either.
Sorry. I thought it was also poor. There's a couple things that I want to see when we rewatch this and be able to see the other angle. I don't know how much of it was not getting. I was pretty consistently seeing poor protection schemes, like that the Titans D line, their stunts and who they were bringing in pressure was a step ahead of where the Bills were. And I don't know how much of that is the play call from Dable, how much of that is Allen not identifying it, how much of that is the wrong adjustment from the defensive line. There weren't a ton of just straight up man on man butt whoopings, but there were also a handful of those too. So when a game has 3 sacks, 8 quarterback hits, and I'm going to guess it's going to be 20 in the total pressures camp. If you're at 20 pressures of hurries, hits, and sacks, that's a bad game. There's no scenario where that's average or even below average. That's a bad game to be able to be in that spot. So it's something where I'll be kind of surprised if the Bills' offensive line comes out in any form of positivity for what's there. The Ravens look great this week.
Yeah, they're a good team.
Yeah. And this is also the offensive line. I think as a unit, we've talked about it on Cover 1 throughout variety of shows that we have, which are all fantastic. We wanted interior O-line reinforcement in the draft. We
Still
didn't get it. I still do. Yeah, we all still do. We rolled back that grouping. As nice as Spencer Brown's story and performances have been,
this is a very
the fact
very
that he's
needed
been
wake-up
back to
call.
reality.
Yeah.
The fact that he's been forced in and we've had to kick Darrell Williams into guard, who I think Williams has struggled at times.
I thought he looked good last week, and I don't remember him getting his butt whooped tonight.
Correct, exactly. Not terrible, but like he was not meant to kick into right guard. He should be at right tackle, but the interior O-line has consistently been a weak spot on this team, and I think that's going to continue to show. It showed in this game. It's reared its ugly head at times. I think that is my biggest concern, and I think that's why maybe, to Aaron's point, this is going to sound terrible, but like him being more down on the offensive line, I think I'm not, because I don't expect anything from John Feliciano. Like, I have a very low bar for him. Like, and I don't mean that to be negative or like terrible to him.
That's your boy, the U.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot he went to. No, I forgot he went to Miami. I've written him off from the record of the database.
The best Hurricanes player on the Bills roster.
Yeah, that's accurate. The only one too. I can't even make that joke. Come on, it's not even.
Jaquan Johnson.
That was a direct shot at Jaquan Johnson.
I'm Jaquan Johnson. What about Gregory Rousseau?
A direct shot at Jaquan Johnson. Just
Gregory Rousseau. Gregory Rousseau also. It's a struggling unit. And that interior O line, I'm going to continue to be worried about that for the remainder of the year. It's an issue.
Yeah. So as we go to kind of pivot over here and into some of our sponsor segments, it's something that, obviously will need to be looked at. I don't think the shift of Williams into guard and Brown into in at tackle has been one of the issues per se. But obviously still plenty of answers to be able to be done. But now we switch into our Uncle Jumbo's Spotlight Player of the Game. I think there were several options to be able to look at here. I'll kick things off. I thought Tremaine Edmonds played a really strong game. I saw a lot of flashes from him, some really good hits on on Derrick Henry, which is not easy. One of the hardest people to tackle in the NFL. So I think there were some other candidates. I wore the Stephon Diggs shirt today, calling for a breakout, and he had a really nice game as well. But I'll give my vote to Tremaine Edmonds, even though I don't know that the defense was great overall. I thought he had a solid game tonight.
I'll step in. It should go to Josh Allen. I think he had the type of game and driving that team to stay competitive. But I'm going to give it to Diggs because he hasn't gotten enough love this year. And I saw comments on Twitter about like what type of game he needed to have. And I think he's actually had a really good season. And I know, Greg, you're a big on pace guy. You like to show people things. Stephon Diggs is on pace for a very nice,
another very good season,
and he only added to that tonight. And I think he added to it in a way that shows people he's still very much a number one wide receiver in the NFL. And when he's against inferior competition, he's totally unguardable. You could even put your whole defense to stop him, and you're not going to stop him on a night like tonight. So I want to even chime in.
I'll give Antonio he's obviously continuing to chirp at everyone in the chat here.
Sure.
I'm never going to give an opposing player the player of the game. He's right. Derrick Henry was the
Derrick Henry's the player of the game. Yeah, but
he was the best player on the field tonight.
This is a Bills show, so if you want a Titans player, you go find a Titan show. But in terms of the Bills, these are the players.
Mine's Aaron for this new graphic. I think it's fantastic.
It is killer.
I think it's a sexy really fantastic graphic. I like it. Well done, Aaron. Somebody mentioned
the floating cans right here.
Yes,
is so awesome.
It's very good.
Somebody asked the bottles in our face.
Yes, and somebody in the chat mentioned if this is what you were working on during the lightning delay last week during the Chiefs game. So I thought was very funny.
I was working on sleep during that.
Well played. I think you guys are spot on. I'd love to give it to Allen or one of the three, Beasley, Diggs, Sanders, an easy pick. I really like Tremaine Edmonds' game, 10 total tackles, 8 solo, a tackle for a loss. He continued to hit with force and oomph, not just making tackles, but having a physical presence. Shed blockers well. I know he had a couple plays where he got caught in the wash a little bit, but another solid, strong game from Tremaine Edmonds. And
I think Trey had a sneaky good game too. Did he even get a target?
That's also a good one too. He had a really nice tackle on Derrick Henry early, coming off the edge and wrapping him up. And then a couple guys on the defensive line had some good games as well, which I'll say for the defensive line talk. But my vote, despite the fact that we struggled so heavily on defense, I'll go with Tremaine Edmonds. He had a really strong game in a dark shadow of a defense.
I like it. We'll pivot back here into our positional breakdowns, and I think that Thomas here chiming in saying that the struggles in the O-line D-line due to simplistic schemes with Spencer Brown in and a young D-line, not many stunts and exotic blocking. I will say, out all the other things we talked about here, and I was very frustrated with the offensive line. Most of my frustration was with the defense in that, there was a lot of talk about how historically good this defense was playing. We're going up against a team that was giving up the most sacks in the NFL and bottom five in every blocking metric. And you only touch the quarterback twice with 0 sacks. This defensive line rotation was supposed to make the big difference. Taylor Lewan went out early from the game. I don't understand where some of that finishing that we're looking for. And I'm sure when the numbers come out, we're going to see a healthy amount of pressures. There were we talked pre-show, there were a lot of forced throwaways and things that I think were positives from the defensive line. But as they started rolling, some of those plays that they were able to get to and putting up 34 points, a small chunk of that was on some fluky things. But ultimately, many of them were on a couple really solid drives in the second half. Those were plays that I was really hopeful that someone was going to step up and make a big play, make a big contribution, get home on one of the, exactly what we saw with Danico Autry, get home on one of those pressures, tip the ball so it goes up in the air so we get the interception rather than the other way around, get in there to make a play. So, I don't know that there was any egregious, horrible plays. The long touchdown was, a good play, but Derrick Henry, it wasn't no one got, dismantled or anything, but obviously I would have liked to have seen that. And I know, in the chat, we've had a lot of people asking, I want to go back to check. I know we've had some asking about the decision of who was going to play in here. And it was, I guess, a surprise that we saw Epinesa go to the bench and Boogie had played progressively better as it went. I saw, Mario Addison had a nice pressure early. Harrison Phillips flashed several times. I don't know exactly who. Obata had a nice play towards the end. I don't know who would have gone to the bench or what Epinesa or Boogie would have done that those guys didn't, but they had both gotten to the quarterback and finished and gotten sacks that we hadn't seen here tonight. Everything's easy in hindsight. I don't know that they would have made any difference.
Yeah, that one's tough for me to live in hindsight. I don't know what significant difference. The thing with Epinesa, I think, maybe he could get home on a sack, but he's playing in a limited snap role if he's in this game still. They're still giving Jerry Hughes the majority, the lion's share of those snaps. And Jerry was actually pretty disruptive, I think. He didn't get to the quarterback. Hey,
appreciate you.
That's awesome.
Membership renewals. We
can go home now. We're done.
That's right. Close up shop for the night. I actually thought that first half, Jerry was super disruptive. Mario was in there a number of times. It was it wasn't the worst defensive line performance that we've seen. They just weren't getting home. And you mentioned there was a number of throwaways. We saw Tannehill is sneaky fast. He got out on a number of those and extended plays, and that's where you saw him hitting A.J. Brown over the middle for 20 yards. And I think that ultimately is the most frustrating thing to me. Not so much that it's frustrating that they couldn't get to a QB who was the most sacked QB. Problem with those types of stats, though, is when it's like the narrative about your team, you are constantly working on not being that team anymore. It's like the gap integrity thing the Bills had to deal with 3 years ago. It was like 4 weeks in a row. They got carved up on the ground, and then they came out and pitched a great game against, I think, a Derrick Henry or something like that, where they were able to fix their gap integrity issues. Same thing's happening with the Titans, right? They're trying to get the ball out quicker, but it didn't feel like Tannehill was comfortable in the pocket all night long. It wasn't like he was sitting there in clean pockets consistently. He had some, and the pass rush got worse as the game went on here, which is a frustrating thing when you have supposedly this deep unit that you can run, and the reason you have a deep unit is to late in game still be able to get those pressures. I do get Bills fans frustration of not hitting home here over the years. I'm totally on board with it, but I think the pressures were there. I think when we watch it back, it's going to be so close on a number of these plays where Jerry's right there and you just don't have anyone finishing off the play, which we thought we were getting out of Rousseau. I'll be interested to see the snap counts here because it does seem like they started off hot with Rousseau and Epinesa, and that they've sort of gone away from some of those snap counts to the younger guys and back more towards the vets. So I'm really interested to see that when we get the snap counts later on.
Yeah, I second all that from you guys. I think the defensive line was super disappointing, especially coming into a game against Tennessee, a team that was 30th in pass blocking efficiency, gave up the 4th most pressures coming into this game. Ryan Tannehill was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. Granted, a lot of that is skewed because of their week 1 game against Arizona, where Chandler Jones had 37 sacks in that first game. But yeah, I don't think the raw stats are going to show it. We didn't have any sacks on Tannehill, but I thought there was some pressure. There was some havoc and chaos that was created, but they just started to wear down as that game went on. And I know some people in the chat have been giving a lot of guys a lot of flack. I thought Jerry Hughes played a good game. I know he's not going to show up on the stat sheet a ton. He was the most consistent edge rusher. He had a nice tip ball coming off the edge, coming screaming on Tannehill. Mario Addison made some nice plays, both in pass rush and in setting the edge, as did Jerry. But again, those aren't going to show up on the stat sheet. I thought Obata flashed at times, both in run support and point of attack, and he had a really nice pressure on Tannehill. But no, Mario was not trash. Good comment, though, also constructive. It's just unfortunate that we weren't able to come away with those raw stats. That's actually a really good point I wanted to get you from Jason. We saw on the touchdown run right after that.
Penetration.
Yep. And then Rousseau was getting coached up on the sideline. You see him like nodding, and they're basically like, you got to crash down on that. You can't allow that to happen. We saw that happen later in the game as well. I don't think it was Rousseau, but we saw another cutback lane where Henry just took it for like 25, 30 yards and barreled over Micah Hyde at the end. This again, Greg, you hit it. There are a group that's supposed to be deep and that is so important to this defense. You can't have this type of breakdown. If we have this type of breakdown, it's going to be hard for this defense to be successful. And they had breakdowns in the run game and then not getting home in the pass game and in the pass rush and not making those big play or those toxic differential type influencing plays on defense was definitely unfortunate and not a good game holistically from the defensive line.
I'll move over to the next phase here, though, in the linebackers, because I thought it's hard to say when a team puts up this many points against your defense. It's hard to say there was a bright spot of the defense, but I agree with your guys' comments on Tremaine Edmonds. And people are talking about how Matt Milano didn't show up because of the flash plays weren't really there. But I think when you watch back, there was pretty good play out of the linebacker group pretty much throughout this game. Obviously, there were some explosive plays, and that's really on the defense as a whole. And 1 of 11, I think everybody, I know my guy, again, the cornerbacks, I know Levi gave up a couple of the bigger explosive plays, but you saw Tremaine Edmonds gave up one in the middle of the field on a catch where he was a little bit short on coverage. So it wasn't a totally clean game by anybody, but I think if there was a bright spot on this team for this game, it was the linebackers. I loved some of the angles that Tremaine Edmonds was taking and the way he was firing his gun in the hole. And those are the issues that we had with Tremaine Edmonds, right? Like being a physical middle linebacker that can play downhill and play the run. We know he can play in coverage and be that long guy in coverage that takes up that kind of space, but can he play behind a decent defensive line and fire into the right gap and take the right read? And for the most part, the big runs, I didn't see him really missing anything.
There was one where he got blocked. Like he didn't do anything. Sure. He got blocked. Like people get blocked.
But he took the right read.
Yes, he was in the right spot. It's just Roger Saffold got to him and blocked him.
Yeah, but there was a number of times where I was messaging Eric privately, just being like, "Oh my God, like mark that play for Tremaine," because that's one you're going to want to look at because he was there consistently. And again, we talked about this offline. This was a typical Derrick Henry game where he had those 3 or 4 big explosive runs, but other than that, he did the Bills were on top of it.
19 carries for 66 yards. It was 3.5 yards a carry.
Yeah, it wasn't that great outside of those big runs. And so if you can get those back, I think that you'll see the linebackers actually didn't have a bad game in this game. So somewhat of a silver lining to what we thought was an elite defense. Maybe the linebackers are still elite.
Yeah, well, I mean, Derrick Henry should be right there in the conversation for MVP of the NFL right now.
Totally.
He's looked
I think
amazing.
he cemented that conversation.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, he'll be right there. He'll probably, be right there neck and neck with Kyler Murray, Josh Allen. Like they're going to be right there for that discussion. And he's going to get some buzz as the
Lamar
candidate
should still
for
be
it.
up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Lamar Jackson's right there as well. But Derrick Henry is fantastic. I will say I went long stretches of this game forgetting that Matt Milano was playing, and I want to see the snap count to see was he ever off the field, or was it just that I didn't notice him a ton?
You didn't notice him. I don't have the exact snap count.
Him a ton
was
like
out.
They have.
He was on the field for a heavy majority of the game, but I also didn't think he looked. He didn't have the same burst and lateral agility that he normally had. He looked like he was kind of running in quicksand a little bit. And I don't know if that's a conditioning piece because of coming back, or he's not all the way there, but he looked sluggish in this.
Maybe tentative.
He didn't seem like he was a vulnerability at any point.
No,
they didn't pick on him. They didn't go at him. They didn't pick on him.
But they weren't using him in the way that we've
seen.
He
wasn't
them
that
use Matt
disruptor.
Milano as like that missile
Correct.
fourth rusher.
They tried to bring him the one time, and Jeremy McNichol picked up the blitz really well. A couple of people had asked about why didn't they bring more in it. I think that's a fair question, but the previous games you had seen defensive lines get home. You didn't need to blitz versus Tennessee's offensive line. So good on them to make adjustments and be ready for what was there. You know, Anthony, as we kind of switch into the defensive backs, you know, I know people are going to give Levi Wallace a hard time. It's A.J. Brown. That's a really hard ask. The reason we didn't hear Julio Jones' name all game was because of, you know, Trey White. He basically took him out of the game. A.J. Brown had his way with Levi Wallace in the opposite side.
Yeah, this is, you know, in Julio, you would have liked to see A.J. Brown get slowed down a bit more, especially with Julio not really being in the game too much. He was in and out and more out than he was in. But A.J. Brown he's the type of receiver the Bills secondary can struggle with. Even Tre'Davious White at times struggles with. I mean, really any corner does when you've got a physical monster who's a good route runner, who's fast, who's strong. Any corner is going to struggle with that, but especially corners like the Bills, you know, they're more technically sound than they are athletic marvels. And if your technique is not on point against big, strong, fast, technically sound dudes, you can get beat. But, you know, it was unfortunate to see Levi get victimized in some of those areas. But I also thought some of it, too, was in conjunction with the overall coverage scheme in the middle of the field. There was a lot of over-the-middle completions that we haven't seen in the past couple of weeks. And so I thought it was a collective effort to a degree with that. It's a shame because we started out from a secondary perspective really strong. We were disguising coverage, no pun intended, disguising coverage again early in the game, showing zone and playing man and showing zone, confusing Ryan Tannehill. We were running more of that cover one robber that we ran against Kansas City, and it worked and it was successful. And then things just started to slowly fall apart and deteriorate a little bit. Not a strong game overall from the secondary. Tannehill didn't kill us. You know, again, it was more Derrick Henry, but in a game like this where you know you want to shut down that run and you're going to have to play kind of one-on-one or more man on the outside, you can't afford to give up any big plays or get gouged like that because of what you have to commit and sacrifice to stop Derrick Henry. This is literally what, like, Tennessee wants in every game. They want you to care about Derrick Henry to the point that you have to play one-on-one, and then they're going to be like, well, we're just going to hope our receivers can beat you. And coming into this game, it's like, well, Julio and A.J. Brown, but then Julio goes away, and you're like, okay, we just have to take care of A.J., and he does all that work, especially all in the second half. I think that was what was a little disappointing as well, seeing that Tennessee made an adjustment offensively coming out for the second half and found ways to get A.J. Brown the ball in a variety of offensive alignments, setting him in motion, putting him in the slot, setting him up in different alignments and trips to different sides of the field, both open side and close, finding ways to get him the ball, and then the Bills not being able to counter his involvement from a secondary perspective. Disappointing, especially from a unit that has been so strong, and especially from a unit coming off of arguably their best performance of the year against Kansas City, to see them struggle against a less, you know, efficient or scary offense in Tennessee versus KC is disappointing. I also think, again, it didn't end up, I mean, it was a big play and it changed the game a bit. I thought Jordan Poyer got held on the Henry touchdown. I have a picture of it. I zoomed in. I stared at my TV hard. I don't want anybody to look at that, though, and be like, well, that's the reason we lost. That was the game. It was an unfortunate call that didn't, you know, go in our favor.
Wasn't any different than
I think you're scoring a touchdown no matter.
The holding call, it wasn't all that different than the holding call on Isaiah McKenzie's long touchdown. Sure. You know, he was there, turned away, he was in the chest plate as he turned away. it certainly looked.
So I
like
think if you're going to call
tackle.
one, I'd like just balanced, calls. But not a great game from the secondary as a whole.
So,
Taron Johnson looked good in some stretches, though.
Taron Johnson looks good in some stretches.
He got lost in coverage in one play.
In one of them, yeah.
He looked.
Here's the thing. Yeah, it's the NFL. Ryan Tannehill's not a bad quarterback, especially if he's not getting hit and has his weapons. The cornerbacks weren't the reason for the loss in this game. Mm-hmm. The defensive backs were not at all the reason for the loss in this game. And they gave up some
helmet. Micah Hyde's helmet, maybe.
Yeah, and that was a fluky play. And I think some
of the craziest plays I've seen.
I don't know how he didn't for a guy.
I mean, it was going to be a pass interference, even if it didn't get caught. So it's still going to be a big explosive play. But I think, there's some criticism to Levi for the type of coverage that one of them was like was it a 4th and 2 that he gave up a big one on?
To AJ Brown over the middle.
I think he only gave up 2 receptions to AJ Brown, and one of them was on the 4th and 2, so it feels massive. But I think that's a really tough situation for, especially the matchup of a Levi versus AJ Brown, because you go man on that 4th and 2, thinking that they're going to probably try to run.
I think more than 2 of AJ Brown's 7 catches were on Levi Wallace.
I don't believe. That's might be true, but I only counted the 2, and the rest of them I thought were in zone coverage. So I don't necessarily put catches on a one guy if it's not in man-to-man for me personally. So we'll look at PFF when it comes out, but I only saw the 2 big ones, and they were on big plays. It was on a 3rd down, I think on a 4th down, which is going to get more shine on it. But outside of that, I thought they played pretty fine. This wasn't the unit that lost the game, in my opinion. I think that they kept Ryan Tannehill in this offense fairly in check in the passing game. It just towards the end of the game when you needed a defensive stop the most, which is what we saw again in that Pittsburgh game. I don't think the defensive backs played terrible in that Pittsburgh game. It was just when you needed to stop the most, that's when we saw bigger receptions get given up. And that is frustrating, especially right here in hindsight, watching being frustrated with the game. But I think when we look back on it, they did what they normally do. They give up some receptions, but they don't tend to give up a ton of big toxic plays. But the run game did that. And I don't even know that. I mean, the safeties missed a couple angles in that run game, but I don't know that the defensive backs were part of the problem. If anything, I think Taron Johnson in run support was really good. I saw Trey get involved in run support a number of times. And we did see Levi come in and
Jordan Poyer interception.
In the Jordan Poyer interception. So it wasn't all bad with this defensive backs. That's all I'm trying to get. And it's hard to get a look at them on the broadcast.
Oh, I certainly, and John's right, that the way that Tennessee builds is like a boxer working the body. Those body shots pay off.
That's a tremendous analogy.
The stats say you don't need to run the ball to have effective play action, but Derrick Henry makes for much more effective play action.
6.2 yards per carry in the 4th quarter on his average on the year. Like that's like
it just the climb as that game goes on obviously shows that it makes a valid impact.
Yeah, 1,000%. Aaron,
one last one here before we go to the drive of the game.
Aaron's, I think, comment was so spot on at the end. I don't think the secondary was the reason the Bills lost this game, but they didn't make those plays or do anything.
They didn't finish the plays they needed.
Correct. Exactly. Spot on. 1,000%. Great way to put it.
So as we switch over and go to our West Herr drive of the game, make sure you're checking out our sponsor, West Herr, who is the largest auto group in New York State, all your automotive needs. The sad part is there was actually a fantastic option for the drive of the game. The Titans had just gone down. The Bills open up the second half with a field goal. The Titans answer back with a big touchdown drive of their own. One of Derrick Henry's 3 touchdowns. And at that point, the Bills needed to take control here. It had kind of sputtered on the previous drive. The Bills answer back with a 9-play, 75-yard drive, multiple, really exciting plays. Obviously, the big one would have been a touchdown to Stephon Diggs, but ended up being a pass interference call, which actually probably would have put Josh over 400 yards passing in the game. They end up scoring there, the Tommy Sweeney touchdown, then the Philly special, push pass from Dawson Knox with a injured hand for a 2-point conversion, and the math made sense to go for 2 there. Just a really, really great drive that you'd like to be the impactful, game-winning kind of drive, but I thought it was still worth recognizing from my standpoint.
I was going to pick the right after the Henry touchdown run, the Bills responded with a nice, long, methodical drive. Yeah. Not super long time-wise, but 7 plays, 72 yards, 3 minutes and 26 seconds. Allen to Diggs. And in my mind at that time, I wrote it down because it was like, all right, you get smacked in the face. They take the momentum in a big way. You come back out and you establish that you're the better team and that these fluky plays aren't going to keep them in the game. Unfortunately, that was not the case for the rest of the night. But in that moment, I thought, like, that's the type of drive that a really good, dominant football team has a huge play, gets punched in the mouth, and still comes back out and able to say, okay, you want to go shot for shot in this game, we can put points up with you. Fortunately, it didn't work out for the Bills, but that was a nice way to respond to a big play. That game could have gotten out of hand after a big play like that on the road.
Yeah, I think you guys are both spot on. I don't have anything for that. Those are both of my two. I'm just going to go with from maybe a negative perspective. I am going to go back to, Tennessee getting the field goal. This was the drive that decided the game. Tennessee gets
Killed
the field goal. Yeah, it's 31-27 Bills. Bills get the ball on their own 25, and they go 6 plays, 5 yards. That's the drive where Josh Allen gets sacked by Simmons. It ends up 4th and 17 when the drive is punted away from the Buffalo 30. That was a great chance, Greg. You mentioned it earlier, to even just build some kind of momentum, go down, maybe get another field goal, or even get a touchdown and put. My thought there was it's 31-27. We just held them to a field goal. Let's drive down, touchy, nail in the coffin, put this game away type of thing. I thought that was the deciding drive overall. But I'm with both of you guys for the positive, Bills drive of the game.
Yeah, that would have been a great spot to take command of the game, put it away by 2 possessions, and could have been a rightful nominee for it. But I appreciate our sponsors over at West Herr. As we switch over here to special teams, obviously the one that's going to stick out is the penalty call on the Isaiah McKenzie, 101-yard touchdown return. Could have been a game-winning kind of touchdown. A couple people in the chat rightfully did bring up that, probably would have given the ball back to Tennessee with 2 minutes to go and multiple timeouts. But I would have liked to have seen that with having the lead and having what's there. So we'll see where that ends up. But it was overall, there was a handful of things going back and forth. Obviously, Tyler Bass is fantastic. Again, every single kick, 52-yarder, both extra points, doing a fantastic job. Again, underwhelming performance by Matt Hawk. Almost had a punt block that only went to 40 yards that ended up putting Tennessee in a solid position, which they returned back on their 70-yard touchdown drive to take the lead, 34-31, which ended up sealing the game. I thought the return units did a solid job, didn't give up too much, especially when they tried to do the stupid Music City Miracle replay thing. I thought that was cheesy to want to go through.
They did it twice.
He pump faked it once and then did it the next time. And just like the original, it was a forward pass.
Is true.
Any thoughts on the special teams?
I had one, sorry to interject there. I really liked the non-run-up kicks for the kickoffs from Tyler Bass, where he just kept pooching it basically to the goal line to pin Tennessee extra deep. I should have looked up their drive starts, but I feel like a majority of their drives started around the 20 and shorter than the 25. So I think that was a nice little thing. It's nice when you have a kicker who has that much of a leg where he can just basically stand next to the ball on the kickoff and still drive it to the goal line. But that was a thing they did consistently from opening kickoff all the way through the end. I like that strategy a lot, and I thought that was a nice wrinkle that they added and included in this game.
And that strategy, to piggyback off that, the comment I want to make, that strategy only works if you have the special teams players that the Bills have. I thought the coverage was great on kickoff. There was one where it looked like they got outside a little bit.
I just went through them all. They had 6 drives where it worked.
One
where
was
they
like
were short of the 25, and
yeah.
then one he got to the 35.
35, yeah. And that was a tough one because
6 to 1, I'll take.
Yeah, it looked like they just got on the outside a little bit. It wasn't even that bad kickoff coverage, but the coverage on punts and kickoffs has really been fantastic. And you saw Tywan Jones lay a dude out on one of the punts and timed it up perfectly. You saw Saren Neal get in and make a few big hits and coverage. It's not that these guys aren't just getting nice wrap-up tackles. They're making nice big hits. They're coming down setting the tone. So loved what we saw out of the coverage units, at least, again, if you're going to have a silver lining game like this, there you go. There's one.
And the final one that we'll talk through here for coaching.
Well, first of all, I want to, tough month here for Brian Dable and his
Yeah.
family, knowing
Yeah.
that these are grandparents that were basically raised him. And then, to find out on the flight to this game that he lost his grandfather after losing his grandmother just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
That's super. Hats off to him for going out and doing his job tonight. And the offense performed well. I think that they were probably trying to rally around him. There's probably a lot of disappointment that they couldn't pull it out and get the win for him in this. But outside of that, coaches, I think everything's going to be about in the last minute here of this conversation is probably going to come down to this fourth down decision to go for it and sneak. I haven't seen what the analytics are on whether or not to go for it in that situation or not, or take the kick. I love the conservative football and say take the kick and think that we can beat you and hold you in overtime. But I know that you don't want to do that on the road and you want to put the ball in your playmakers' hands. I didn't love the call itself, especially like I mentioned earlier with the offensive line. I didn't think the Bills were winning in the trenches on that side of the ball. And I don't think you can make that call in a spot like that unless you feel like you're really able to make a push and win the trenches. So that bothered me that was the type of call. Greg, you had talked offline, like maybe a roll out type of thing or something where you give yourself a little bit more options and you have the option to scramble, do a little bit more with the ball. So I think that one's going to be nitpicked a lot. And then the early on decisions to not go for it a little bit early on in that game and trust your defense to hold up for a long drive, before you realize that your defense was going to be exposed all night long. They had a chance to go up early in this game. And I think that did set a tone in this, that they weren't aggressive in those situations in the red zone to try to get 6. And it allowed Tennessee to break off that Derrick Henry run and take a lead when they otherwise should have not have been really close in this ballgame. It should have been 14-7 at that point. They were moving consistently throughout this game. Tennessee's defense really couldn't stop the Bills' offense from moving down and getting points, and the lack of aggression. I don't need Sean McDermott to take every opportunity and go for it, but it would be nice early in these games sometimes if he made that decision to be aggressive early on and then rely on your defense to make a stop early if you have to, but give your offense a chance to get that 6 and put the game within arm's length, because it allowed Tennessee to just stay and continue to build momentum. A lot of people don't believe in momentum. I do. I think they allowed them to stick in this game and build momentum, and a lot of it started with those first 2 field goals.
Anthony, how about your thoughts on the coaching?
The fourth down one is so hindsighty. I understand, like the conservative approach and thinking like, okay, let's kick the field goal and go into OT. But then if Tennessee gets the ball first, you haven't stopped them. Your defense is gassed. They might just continue to run it down your throat. It is what it is. Again, to Aaron's point, not knowing the numbers, I feel like the analytics probably scream go for it on fourth down. So at the end of the day, I'm okay with going for it. And I would also imagine the success rate of QB sneaks from within a half a yard are pretty high in general, let alone with a very large quarterback in Josh Allen. But I feel like I've said this a lot this episode. To Aaron's point, I don't think you've won in the trenches going into that point of the game. And so I don't want to use a play, despite the fact that it has a high success rate, historically or traditionally, where you have to rely on the interior of the offensive line or in the offensive line in general that hasn't had a strong performance up to that point. And to Tennessee's credit, despite their performances on defense this year, Simmons and Harold Landry are both monsters on the defensive line. And I'd rather not give the few studs that a team has the opportunity to make a play. So I would have preferred, even though it's probably a little bit lower percentage, give me Stephon Diggs or Manny or Cole Beasley in any of the one-on-one matchups there against one of their weaker corners. Maybe potentially if Dawson Knox isn't hurt, that's an option there as well. My bigger thing with the coaching is, so Allen was 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10
on sneaks. Yeah. So that's a high percentage. I can't fault the coaching staff for going with that. It's a hindsight thing. My bigger thing from the coaching perspective is overall just the lack of adjustment on defense. If you take out the end of the half drive for the Titans where they just kind of knelt it and ended. So the first drives for the Titans were punt, interception. They then scored on their next 6 drives consecutively, 3 touchdowns and 3 field goals. And their drives went for very long plays, aside from the Henry one that was 1 play for 76 yards, 7 plays, 54 yards. They started the drive inside our territory to go 2 for 11, but then 12 plays, 67 yards, 9 plays, 45 yards, 8 plays, 70 yards. big chunk drives, clock churning drives. It just seemed like the Bills didn't have any adjustments or answers for Tennessee. And I don't know if it was just pure, gassed and worn down in the second half or the coaching adjustments. I really want to dig into the all-22. Well, I don't want to dig into the all-22 because I don't want to watch this game, but to really see what adjustments were made by both teams. But the lack of adjustments and responsiveness defensively really was my bigger coaching takeaway, that Tennessee just continued to churn, and we really had no answer for it.
There were a couple scenarios early on that were similar to those spots in the Texans game where, okay, we hold them to a punt, we drive down, we're controlling the game, it's okay to kick the field goal, I know we're inside the 10, then we hold them again and we drive down, and then you get the interception, and we're, like you said, punt, interception were the three possessions by Tennessee. So in that spot, I get the idea that, hey, we're controlling this, it's okay to take those. But, like I said, everything's easy in hindsight. You end up kicking a field goal at the 5 and at the 10-yard line, 2 20-yard field goals. It's easy to say, hey, maybe we go for it there and be able to bring something forward. Mike Vrabel did the same thing. They kicked field goals as well in spots where they could have gone for it on fourth down. So that's obviously not that simple to be able to do. The end of the game decision, I think, is a slam dunk. You have a huge athletic quarterback. You have a chance to win the game. I get frustrated with people all the time using broad brush analytics numbers for the league in who should go for it on fourth down, who should go for 2-point conversions, as if it's the same thing if you have Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, as if you have Daniel Jones and Carson Wentz and whoever right now, Justin Fields or some of the rookie quarterbacks. The numbers aren't the same. You don't have the same likelihood to convert. So when you talk about the likelihood of, we'll just kick the field goal and go to overtime, well, the Titans have just been marching down the field. If they win the toss, I don't think you have a 50-50 shot of stopping them. We had shown that we didn't have a 50-50 shot of stopping them. I think that I understand that. You're right there. The offense had moved the ball the whole time. Eric pointed out 9 out of 10 on sneaks. I also think that having it, they were decently spread out. They had receivers. This wasn't some big bunch formation.
Right. Josh
was back in shotgun and then rushed up there to try to sneak it quickly. And Jeffrey Simmons makes an amazing play. And he blows Deion Dawkins back. John Feliciano, blocks down with Morse to go right behind them. I feel like I think Josh, it was just the combination. Josh thought he was going to be able to go off to the left and ended up going directly into Deion Dawkins, basically.
He slipped a little, too.
And then as he got hit, it made his leg slip out, and it just, that whole combination, went poorly. Josh has been outstanding in those plays. He's dove over in those plays. He's been able to make plays. I would bet on that 10 times out of 10.
Well, and we saw...
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, we saw in the Cowboys game, even when a quarterback gets it, they can
snap.
Rule it not.
Yes, that's good. Yeah, Dak Prescott last night. He looked like he did convert.
Simmons made a play for the Titans that we needed someone on the Bills defense to make. Simmons made a great play. Granted, Josh slipped a bit, but he made a great play.
It would have been like
somebody to make that play.
If Star Latuile had knocked Derrick Henry backwards instead of Henry breaking the tackle and going in for the touchdown. We needed someone to make an individual play. Jeffrey Simmons made that individual play. So it was good on them. I want Sean McDermott to go for that play 10 times out of 10 in that scenario with what was there. I just felt like there's a higher probability in that moment of converting with Josh Allen. And, I personally would have liked to see a rollout where you give him the option in a flood pattern with 3 receivers trailing over there, and Josh can either throw it to one of them or run from that standpoint. I would have preferred that. Obviously he showed what he did the play before, putting his body on the line. I would have preferred one of those, but again, Josh was 9 out of 10 going for quarterback sneaks, and on those 4th and 1 spots, it's kind of hard to blame them for thinking that 90% conversion rate would continue and that he'd be able to convert in that spot.
Yeah, and it was a half a yard, and I know some of the comments too that, I also agree with, Tennessee, it seemed like knew it was going to be a QB sneak, but also if your offensive line and really big quarterback can't get a half a yard, you don't deserve to win the football game. The Bills went to go win the football game. Tennessee made a play. We didn't. It is what it is.
They won the game.
Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts here as we close out here. Aaron, any final thoughts for the people?
Yeah. Final thought is it's going to be frustrating. We're going to look at that one play. There's no guarantee, even if they get that first down, that they're able to then score in the red zone and actually do anything with that conversion. So harp on that play tonight, tomorrow. Be mad about this game, but then it's time to move on. This is still a very good football team. I think there was a number of indicators in this game alone that this was a bit of a fluky game. This happens to really good NFL teams all the time. There's some fluky big plays, some explosive plays that we're not used to seeing this defense give up. This defense has 1 or 2 to 3 of these performances a year where they don't look anything like themselves. They're giving up big plays. It happens. It's not fun. Unfortunately, it's happened on primetime a couple times where they've had games like this. And so everybody sees this about the Bills. The media is going to tell us that they're paper tigers and they're not real and that the Ravens are the real team. So it's going to be a frustrating 2 weeks here. Let's try to stay back to where we are, to watch back this last month of football, try to find out who this team is going forward. I think things are way better than they feel right now. This Bills team is still very, very good. I think they're still one of the best teams in the NFL, and they played a really sloppy game at times tonight, and they played maybe not their best game strategically, and they were still in this game a half yard away from having a new set of downs for a chance to win this game. So it's not all bad, even though it feels like crap right now. It's late. It's past my bedtime. I'm going to be angry for the next couple of days, and it's okay for you to be angry too. But then let's just reel it in and get back to the mission of destroying the Dolphins on our way to winning off another 8-9 in a row.
Anthony.
Everything's terrible. But no, I think that it's frustrating to have a loss like this. But I mean, again, I think a lot. I'll just go for myself here. I had the Bills 4-2 heading into the bye preseason. Granted, a lot of things changed, but I thought they would lose to. Granted, I didn't expect all the injuries and everything to happen to Tennessee. Right. I thought Tennessee would come into this game stronger.
Same.
But I had them losing this game to Tennessee preseason. I also had them losing to the Chiefs, but I had them going in at 4-2 into the bye. But all is not lost for everybody who thinks like the conference is done and this and that. Tennessee still has to play Kansas City. They have a lot of tough games. The
Chargers just got the crap kicked out of them.
Correct.
Baltimore looked terrible in their loss.
And Baltimore's got one of the AFC North as a whole, but Baltimore too has one of the most difficult schedules and stretches going down for the rest of the year. It's week 6 in a 17-game season. There is so much left to be played. I don't want to give all the cliches of like, this loss is going to galvanize them and you'd still take 4-2 heading into the bye.
It is.
Like it's relevant for sure. And I don't want to give all of those cliches. Like this loss sucks. It sucks to have it against a team that we don't like historically. It sucks the way it happened.
They have punchable faces.
Yeah. The Bills have the benefit of playing the AFCs. There's nothing wrong with that.
Accurate.
Like we can't help it that the other teams in our division are playing poorly. The Bills get a
The
benefit.
Patriots leaned on that for a decade.
Yeah, that's very true.
More than 2 freaking decades.
1,000% for a gajillion years. So it's in a vacuum. This loss is terrible.
Yeah,
it
Baltimore
sucks.
should have lost to the Lions. They got beat
for
59 minutes and 59 seconds by the Lions.
Very accurate.
It's the NFL, man.
They're lucky the delay of game, wasn't called.
Yeah.
But in a vacuum, it's terrible. But still, think big picture. The conference is most definitely not lost whatsoever. Yeah. We'll see what happens in the next 3-4 weeks when the Bills have the Dolphins and the Jags and the Jets, and then things start to shake out. But yeah, nobody panic. This isn't terrible. There's a lot of good to take away from this game. You're just not going to see it right now because it's clouded in a dark cloud of disappointment and anger. But, take it in stride and hope for the best. This is still a good football team. Don't write anybody off. But, this sucks, but it is what it is.
The Bills gave up a 76-yard touchdown run and a dominant performance to Derrick Henry. The Bills had a weird ball bounce off Micah Hyde's helmet and Julio Jones catches it for a ridiculous play. They had a bunch of weird penalties go against them that seemed odd. They had fluky plays, balls that tipped up in the air were intercepted by the Titans, and balls that were tipped up in the air fell and landed on the ground for the Bills. So many weird little things went against the Bills, and they still had a chance to win this game and had the ball at the Tennessee 2-yard line going in for a game-winning touchdown. That's how good this team is. That's how reassured you should feel rooting for this team, how confident you should be in these games going forward. The Bills lost a heavyweight title fight, trading haymakers back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and lost the game. It was a tough loss. they had an awful lot of stuff go against them, and they still had a chance to win this game, and we're right there. John with a great point. The Bucs were 7-5 last year after 12 weeks, 5 losses in their first 12 games, and that's the kind of thought process you have to have. This is still a very good team. They're going to be right back here. They have a week off. Last year, they had a heartbreaking, weird loss right before the bye week with the Hail Murray and went into the bye, let that burn in their bellies and have to stew on it during the whole time, and then came out like a team on fire and rattled off a ton of wins all the way through the rest of the season, into the playoffs, all the way to the AFC Championship game. They're going to need to do that kind of thing again here. They're going to need to let it burn in their bellies, let this hurt, let this be painful, and then do something about it and come back out. And you have an opportunity when you come back out and the games are the Dolphins and the Jags and the Jets and the games like that, let out your frustrations on teams that you're supposed to beat and get ready. Because then, after that 3-game kind of easy stretch, you have, warming back up with the Colts and then the Saints, Patriots, Buccaneers with some, some real teams. They're going to be in position to win an awful lot of games the rest of the way. The Bills are going to be favored in every single game except for one. Besides the game at Tampa Bay, the Bills are going to be favored in every single game the rest of the way. So they still have a chance to win 13, 14 games here to be able to do that the rest of the way. This is going to be an outstanding season, playing late into the year, playing into the playoffs. The number 1 seed is still in play. There's lots of things to be excited about, even though tonight sucked.
Are you saying it galvanized? It's going to galvanize the team.
It did galvanize the team last year, and it's going to again.
Good.
So we appreciate you guys were great in the chat. I know games like this are frustrating, but we still want to take the time to go through and be able to break everything down, explain why things happened, understand why it sucked, and why we needed to be able to deal with this. But there's still plenty of hope and reason for optimism for this season, and I hope that you guys see that. So on behalf of our sponsors, make sure you're checking out everyone over at Underdog Fantasy. Download the app, use promo code COVER1. Come over and help out our friends Uncle Jumbo's. Tonight is a great night to be able to enjoy an Uncle Jumbo's and get these things off of your mind. If you need an automobile, check out our friends over at West Herr. But on behalf of Anthony Prohaska, Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Tompsett. You have been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.